The wind nearly knocked her off her feet before she even reached the porch. Clara Bennett stood at the edge of Black Hollow Ranch, with dust clinging to her skirt and fear sitting heavy in her chest. The wagon that had brought her there was already turning back down the trail. She watched it disappear into the wide stretch of Wyoming prairie, the driver not once looking behind him. She was alone. The ranch spread out before her like something too big to belong to one man. A wide barn stood to the right, weathered and strong. Fences stretched across open land, where cattle grazed under the fading orange sky. Smoke rose slow and thin from the chimney of a small wooden house. This was supposed to be her new beginning. The letter had been clear. A rancher named Caleb Turner needed a housekeeper. Good pay. Room included. No questions asked about past troubles. That last line had mattered most. Clara lifted her small carpet bag and walked toward the house. Each step felt heavier than the last. She had nowhere else to go if this failed. She knocked once. The door opened almost at once. The man who stood there filled the doorway. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his dark shirt rolled at the sleeves, his hands rough from work. A thick beard framed his face, and his eyes were the deep brown of storm clouds before rain. He looked older than she expected, perhaps mid-30s, with lines carved by sun and silence. "You're late," he said. His voice was low and steady, not unkind, but not warm either. "The river flooded near Cheyenne," Clara answered. "The bridge was washed out." He studied her for a long moment. His gaze moved from her worn boots to the small bag in her hand. She felt the old familiar weight of being measured and found lacking. "You alone?" he asked. "Yes." He stepped aside without another word. "Come in." The cabin was clean but plain. A wooden table near the window, a cast-iron stove giving off steady heat. 2 chairs, one narrow hallway leading to what must have been a bedroom. No pictures on the walls, no decorations, just space. He closed the door behind her, shutting out the wind. "I'm Caleb Turner," he said. "Clara Bennett." He nodded once. "Supper's on the stove. You can eat." There was no welcome, no smile, but there was food. Clara set her bag down carefully. The smell of beef stew filled the room. Her stomach tightened with hunger she had been ignoring all day. They ate in near silence. Caleb sat across from her, elbows resting lightly on the table. He did not stare, but she felt his awareness all the same, like he was trying to decide something important. "You worked before?" he asked. "In Laramie, boarding house, cooking and cleaning." "Why'd you leave?" The question was simple. The answer was not. "The owner sold the place," she said, choosing only part of the truth. She did not mention the owner's son. She did not mention locked doors. Caleb nodded slowly. "You'll rise before sun. Cook for me and the 2 hands that come by noon. Laundry once a week. Keep the place in order. I don't ask much else. I can do that." Silence returned. Outside, the sky darkened to deep blue. The prairie wind howled against the walls, rattling the shutters. Clara's heart began to pound as a thought crept into her mind. And she had been so focused on reaching the ranch that she had not allowed herself to think about the simplest question. There was only one bedroom. She placed her spoon down carefully. "Mr. Turner," she said softly, "where will I sleep?" The question hung between them. Caleb did not answer right away. He leaned back slightly in his chair, his expression unreadable. The fire popped in the stove. The wind pressed hard against the cabin. For a moment, Clara feared she had made a terrible mistake. He stood. Without speaking, he walked toward the narrow hallway. Clara remained seated, her pulse loud in her ears. She did not know whether to follow or stay. He returned a few seconds later, carrying an armful of folded blankets. He walked to the far corner of the main room, near the fire, where a long wooden bench sat against the wall. He laid the blankets down carefully. Then he bent and pulled something from beneath the bench, a thin but clean mattress. He placed it on top. Finally, he turned down the top blanket, revealing smooth sheets beneath. "Here," he said quietly. "You'll sleep here." Clara blinked. "You'll have the fire close. It stays warm through the night." "And you?" she asked. "I've slept in the barn before. Won't hurt me." The words were simple, and the gesture was not. He stepped back, giving her space. "I don't take advantage of people who come asking for work," he added, his voice firm now. "You're safe here." Clara felt something inside her loosen, something tight and coiled for months. "Thank you," she whispered. He gave one small nod and turned away, stepping outside into the cold without another word. Clara stood slowly and walked to the bedding. She touched the sheet with trembling fingers. It was clean, fresh, not thrown together in carelessness but arranged with thought. She sat down on the edge. Outside, she heard the barn door creak, heard the soft sound of cattle shifting, heard the lonely wind across open land. For the first time since leaving Laramie, she did not feel hunted by memory. She changed into her nightdress quickly and slid beneath the blankets. The fire warmed her side. The mattress, though thin, felt softer than anything she had known in months. She did not realize she was crying until tears slipped quietly into her hair. Morning came early. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and the faint gray light of dawn. For a second, she forgot where she was. Then she remembered the bench, the blankets, the man who had chosen the barn over letting her feel unsafe. She rose quickly and folded the bedding neatly. Caleb entered from outside, brushing frost from his shoulders. "You're up," he said. "Yes." "Good." That was all. But when he passed her on his way to the stove, she noticed he did not look tired. She cooked eggs and biscuits while he poured coffee. The rhythm felt natural, simple. No heavy silence, just quiet understanding. The two ranch hands arrived before noon. Jacob and Henry, both younger, both respectful enough, though their eyes lingered with curiosity. "She'll be keeping house," Caleb said flatly when they glanced her way. That was explanation enough. Work filled the day. Clara scrubbed floors, washed curtains stiff with dust, and opened windows to let in fresh air. She found herself humming without meaning to. By afternoon, the cabin looked brighter. Caleb noticed. "You've got a way of making a place feel different," he said. "Cleaner?" she asked, with a small smile. "Lived in." The word stayed with her. That night, when she asked again where he would sleep, he only shrugged. "Barn's fine." Days passed into a quiet routine. Clara learned the sound of Caleb's boots on the porch, the way he removed his hat before stepping inside, yet the way he never entered the cabin without knocking first, even though it was his home. She began cooking meals that reminded her of her mother. Cornbread with honey, stew thick with carrots, apple pie when supplies allowed. Caleb ate every bite without complaint. Sometimes, in the evenings, they sat across from each other by the fire. He would mend tack or sharpen tools. She would stitch torn shirts. They did not speak much of the past, until one night. The wind howled stronger than usual. Snow pressed against the windows. Clara looked up from her sewing. Why does a man with a ranch this size live alone? Caleb's hands paused. "My wife died," he said simply. The words were quiet but heavy. "I'm sorry." So am I. He stared into the fire. After that, folks stopped coming around much. Guess grief makes people uncomfortable. Clara understood that more than he knew. I don't scare easy, she said. He glanced at her then, something softer in his gaze. No, he agreed. You don't. Winter settled deeper. One afternoon, a rider approached the ranch. Clara was hanging laundry when she saw him. Her breath caught in her throat. She knew that posture, that arrogant tilt of his shoulders. Thomas Grady, the man from Laramie, and the owner's son. Her hands began to shake. He dismounted slowly, his smile sharp as a blade. Well now, he called. Found yourself a new protector? Caleb stepped out of the barn at that exact moment. His eyes moved from Clara's pale face to the stranger's smirk. Can I help you? Caleb asked. Thomas laughed lightly. Just checking on an old friend. Clara stepped back, but Caleb moved forward. She works here, Caleb said evenly. That's all you need to know. Thomas's gaze darkened. You don't know what kind of woman you've let into your house. Caleb did not raise his voice. I know exactly what kind. Silence stretched tight. The wind whipped between them. Thomas spat into the dirt. She owes me. Clara felt the old fear claw at her chest. Before she could speak, Caleb took one slow step closer to Thomas. Whatever you think she owes, Caleb said, his voice like iron. You collect it somewhere else. Thomas studied him, measuring. Then he swung back onto his horse. This ain't finished, he muttered. He rode away. Clara did not realize she had been holding her breath until the sound of hooves faded. Caleb turned to her. You want to tell me? He asked gently. She shook her head once, tears burning. He did not push. Instead, he walked to the porch and picked up a folded blanket from the railing where it had been airing in the cold sun. He stepped inside the cabin. Clara followed slowly. He laid the blanket over the bench again, smoothing it with careful hands, just like that first night. You'll sleep warm, he said quietly, and you'll stay safe. Clara looked at him, truly looked at him, and for the first time in years, and she believed it. The wind did not stop for 3 days. It screamed across the prairie like something angry and alive, shaking the cabin walls and burying the fence posts in snow. Clara barely slept the night Thomas Grady came to the ranch. Every small sound made her sit up beneath the blankets, her heart racing. But no rider returned. Caleb did not mention Thomas the next morning. He simply rose before dawn and went about his work. Yet Clara noticed something different. He checked the perimeter fence twice. He kept his rifle closer than before. His eyes scanned the horizon more often. Protection without questions. It settled deep inside her. By noon, snow covered the land in thick white layers. Jacob and Henry could not make it out from town. Clara and Caleb were alone on the ranch. She baked bread that afternoon, yet the smell warm and steady. Caleb came in with snow clinging to his coat. She moved to help brush it off without thinking. Her hands paused when she realized how close she stood to him. He did not step away. You don't have to stay, he said quietly. If that man brings trouble, I won't have you dragged into it. This trouble followed me, Clara answered. Not the other way around. He studied her face. Then we face it when it comes. We. The word stayed with her long after he stepped back outside. That night, the storm worsened. The barn door banged loose. Caleb went out to secure it. Minutes stretched too long. Clara wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped onto the porch. Snow stung her cheeks. She could barely see through the white swirl. Then she saw him. Caleb stood near the barn, struggling against the wind to pull the heavy door shut. His boots slipped on ice. Without thinking, Clara ran toward him. The snow soaked through her skirt instantly. The cold bit her ankles. She grabbed the loose rope near the door and pulled with all her strength. Together they forced the door closed. Caleb turned to her, breath clouding in the air. You shouldn't be out here. And let you fight it alone?" For a moment they stood there in the storm, faces inches apart. Snow clung to his beard. Her fingers were numb, still gripping the rope. Something passed between them. Not spoken, not named. He gently took her hand and guided her back toward the house. Inside, he shut the door tight and turned to her. "You're shaking. So are you." He hesitated only a second before moving closer to the fire. He placed another log inside and motioned her nearer. She stood beside him, heat slowly returning to her frozen skin. When her foot slipped on melted snow near the hearth, Caleb caught her by the waist. His hand stayed there a moment longer than needed. Neither moved. The storm roared outside, but inside the cabin, there was only breath and closeness. Clara stepped back first. "I'll make tea," she said softly. He nodded once. The next morning, the world looked different. The storm had passed. The sky was clear blue. Snow stretched across the land untouched and bright. Clara stepped outside and drew in a deep breath. It felt like standing at the edge of something new. That afternoon, a rider approached again. Not Thomas, Reverend Cole from Pine Creek. He removed his hat respectfully when Clara opened the door. "Miss Bennett," he said, "there's talk in town." She felt the weight of it before he even explained. Thomas Grady had been spreading stories, ugly ones, saying Clara had run off after stealing money, saying Caleb had taken in a woman with no morals, saying the ranch was no place for decent folk to trade. Caleb listened without interruption. When the Reverend finished, silence filled the room. "I thought you should know," Reverend Cole added. "Rumors grow fast in winter." "Thank you," Caleb said evenly. After the Reverend left, Clara stared into the fire. "You should send me away," she whispered. Caleb turned sharply. "No. You don't owe me this." His jaw tightened. "I don't make choices out of fear. But your cattle buyers might. The feed suppliers might." He stepped closer. "I lost my wife 3 years ago," he said, voice low. "I lost neighbors. I lost friends who didn't know what to say to a grieving man. I'm not losing you because someone can't stand a woman who walked away." The words hit her harder than any storm wind. "You'd fight for me?" she asked quietly. "I already am." The following Sunday, Clara insisted on going into town. "If they're talking, let them see me," she said. Caleb saddled the horses without argument. The ride into Pine Creek was silent but steady. Snow crunched under hooves. Smoke curled from chimneys. People turned as soon as they arrived. Whispers followed them into the general store. Clara held her head high. Mrs. Dalton, who once ordered 3 dresses from her, approached slowly. "Are the stories true?" Clara met her eyes. "No, Mrs. Dalton studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "I didn't think so. It was small, but it mattered. Not everyone was kind." 2 men muttered as Caleb passed. One of them laughed under his breath. Caleb did not react, but Clara saw the muscle in his jaw tighten. Outside the store, Thomas Grady waited. He leaned against the hitching post, his smile cold. "Thought you'd hide all winter," he said loudly. Caleb stepped between him and Clara. "I told you once," Caleb said. "That was enough." Thomas laughed. "She'll run from you too. That's what she does." Clara stepped around Caleb before he could stop her. "I left because you tried to trap me," she said clearly, so others could hear. "You locked doors. You made promises you never meant to keep. I owe you nothing." Gasps rose from nearby shoppers. Thomas's smile faltered. "You think anyone believes that?" "I do," Mrs. Dalton said from the doorway. Then another voice joined. "And I do." Reverend Cole stepped forward. The tide shifted. Thomas's face flushed red. He grabbed Clara's wrist, suddenly. Before anyone could react, Caleb moved. He struck Thomas once, hard and fast. Thomas fell into the snow. Silence fell heavy over the street. Caleb's voice was calm, but deadly steady. "Touch her again, and you'll answer to me." Thomas scrambled up, humiliation burning in his eyes. He mounted his horse without another word and rode out of town. The whispers did not stop that day, but they changed. Clara felt it. That night, back at the ranch, she stood near the bench where she had first slept. "Why did you help me?" she asked quietly. Caleb looked at her, truly looked. "What, because the first night you asked where you'd sleep, you sounded like someone who had never once been given a choice," her breath caught. "And you deserved one." The fire crackled softly. She stepped closer. "I'm tired of running," she admitted. "I don't want to leave again." "Then don't." It was that simple. Winter continued, but something inside the cabin shifted. The space between them grew smaller. Shared glances lasted longer. Hands brushed more often. One evening, as Clara stitched by the fire, Caleb spoke. "I built that bench after my wife passed," he said.